Maine Secretary of State Charlie Summers completing a 2-month investigation, sharing results of it yesterday, and he's called in this morning on the PDQ telephone line from Scarborough. Mr. Summers, could you kind of go over what your findings were after a 2-month investigation into allegations of possible fraud by college students and a look at Maine's voting system?
To me, the most eye-opening thing that came out of the investigation were just, and I'm glad you pointed out, there are 972,000 eligible voters in the state of Maine. We were able to take a sampling of less than 1% of that, a little over 500 voters, and we've looked not only at the information that the chairman of the Maine Republican Party, Charlie Webster, brought to us, but also in regards to allegations from one of our employees at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles that there may in fact be non-citizens registering to vote using the motor voter program. And out of that, I think it's again interesting to note that the overriding thing is the number of clerical errors that occur in the registration process. Of all the cases that we looked at, 84% of the problems that we were seeing were because of clerical error, and 79% of those errors occurred on election day. That I think is just an eye-opening statistic. Out of that, we found that the 6 non-citizens on our voter rolls, one of those non-citizens actually had registered to vote. But one of the things, Rick and George, that hampered our investigation was the fact that in Maine, by law, towns and cities are only required to keep their voter history for 2 years. So beyond 2007, when the central voter registration system was put into effect, if we tried to go back further than that, it was extremely difficult. In fact, the city of Portland was the only city that had records back to 2002, which is how we were able to locate the non-citizens who are in fact or were in fact on our voting rolls. When you look at the students issue, we took a lot of the names. I think we started out with about 204. A lot of those we took off the list because they were only registered in the state of Maine. But that left 77 students that were found to be actively registered in Maine and another state, and 5 of those students had actually voted in the same year in both states, however, not in the same election. So, what you're seeing is a system where, if you keep in mind, we're operating in the year 2011, but our election system is really based on an 1820 model the year Maine became a state. And I think what this really calls for is a complete look at our election process. I haven't been able to find any comprehensive, holistic review of our processes and procedures. And if you again consider the fact we're operating on an 1820 model, I think that's just unacceptable. In private sector, every year companies will review their best practices, what they're not doing right, and try to make adjustments and move forward. We haven't done that in Maine that I can find ever. And I think we're long overdue for that, and that's really what has come out of this. Because, quite frankly, when you have just such a high percentage of clerical errors going on, I mean, it does, I think, suggest a time to look at it, a time to give the clerks the ability to prepare for their elections, give them a couple of days. I think that's not unreasonable.
Well, the headlines were, of course, that you wanted to improve the system. Good idea. Most of the newspapers are saying no voter fraud, student voter fraud. Obviously, we're in a political situation here with the referendum coming up. Mm-hmm. And immediately, and not surprisingly, we know that, David Farmer, Protect Maine Votes, came right out of the woodwork yesterday and saying, wait a minute, you're playing politics, trying to find voter fraud, the same-day registration. And he said, first of all, he went to the Charlie Webster allegations and said they were false, outrageous, perhaps defamatory. I give you a chance to comment on those. Well,
I can't comment on what Charlie Webster says or David Farmer. I don't control their comments. But I think that for a group that calls itself Protect Maine Votes and to make a statement that I've read his statements. When you find whether it's one person, a non-citizen who has illegally voted in Maine, or it's 1,000. The Supreme Court decided years ago that it's one vote, one person. And, as recently as the debate on LD 1376, which David Farmer is against, that when that came out, I think John Patrick, who is the Democratic lead on the Legal and Veterans Affairs Committee, which oversees elections, said it best in the floor debate when he said if one Democrat, one Republican, or one independent is disenfranchised, that's too many. And I think, when you consider that with a tiny, tiny sampling, 0.04% of the total number of voters we have in the state of Maine, turns up, non-citizens on our rolls, shows students who are actively registered in 2 states, when it shows that 11 of those people did not check that they were registered in another state on their registration card, and the registrars went ahead and accepted that anyway. That shows, to me, there are some breakdowns in the system, and it's high time to take a comprehensive, holistic review of our methodologies, our practices, our procedures. And, I think that anybody who is concerned with this process, particularly myself as a chief election official, has to look at this, and it has to raise some questions. And, I believe that we can look at this and make a review or do a review and make recommendations to the legislature in January to strengthen and secure our ballots, our voting system in the state of Maine. I think that should be a goal of everyone, and to simply deride or dismiss an investigation that I believe turned up some concrete facts is probably not the course of action I would recommend.